Three.
All right, happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to the subseasonal discussion. We're going to go ahead and dive into it. My colleague William is on the line with me as well, and feel free to jump in, William, to if you want to add anything as we go along here as well. So what I did for this update for this outlook is I wanted to bring up the latest dynamic models and long lead forecasts. So on the upper left of the CFS weeklies, CFS weeklies middle top is the GFS Ensemble weeklies, and on the far upper right is the European weeklies from last night. And for the 16 to 20-day period, so they have a lot of different stories here. The NOAA set really likes a warm west, while the European likes a cool west and a warm east. So a pretty big difference here, a tougher 16 to 20 day as we head to the end of May. I did want to break out the European weeklies. There's 51 members, so I wanted to show you that 30 of those 51 members do have that same pattern, like even more amplified warm east to Midwest to east, cool west. But another 41% of the members, the other 21 are more like what you see from the NOAA models. So, under the hood here, there is some debate amongst the European members about which way this is going to go, and pretty opposite looks here. I mean, this would be a very bearish pattern for late May with cooler Texas to the Midwest and a neutral East Coast be bearish for the eastern half of the U.S. While this would be an early season surge of warmth, maybe some 80s in parts of the Midwest and East Coast area. Our forecast for the 16 to 30 day, we don't do an official 16 to 20 day, we do a 16 to 30 day for our clients. And we have this kind of look, which is kind of a little bit more of a westward lean in our warm pattern. David Streit put these together this morning based on the various analog matches from the European ensemble using different baselines like the US specific matches in the 11-15 day, Northern Hemisphere 1 to 10, and Northern Hemisphere 11 to 15. And it did offer different stories. You've got the NOAA look here in the middle. You've got a little bit more of the European ensemble mean for the 16 and 20 day here at the bottom. And then you've got this kind of mixed mosh mess here at the top. So it is really a complicated forecast window right now, and definitely more of a challenge. One thing that's been driving our thinking lately has been the surge in the global wind. That is, Dave was complaining about the cool May, and we think that's a big player in that. The global wind has been accelerating and increasing as we go deeper into May, and that tends to be a more active, unsettled, cool, wet pattern for the lower 48. We've had 32 positive global wind Mays since we started collecting this data, and I think this goes back to 1950 here. And so since 1950, we've had 32 times where the May has had a positive global wind, and it's been cooler than normal across a large portion of the U.S. as a result of that when that's happened. Our estimate for May 2021 right now is not too far off. It's a little different in the west. We've got the warmth in the southwest near the drought area rather than the northwest where the historical composite shows. And we do have a pretty cool mid-continent look there as well. So we think this is a main player here for how this May has been playing out. And you can look at the global wind oscillation to get a sense of the flavors that are possible. This is the start. Hour zero is down here, just lifting into the positive global wind space, and then it goes through phase 5, 6, and 7 on the European and American models. They both agree on going to phase 7 by the 11 to 15 day, but you can see it's starting to revert back maybe towards 6 by the 16 to 20 day, or maybe it'll wiggle its way over to 8. So I mean, if you look at phase 7, that's a pretty cool phase. That's more like what the NOAA models are showing: cool east, warm west for this. And these are matches only for the 16 to 20 day period. So this is May 26th to May 30th, just to give you an idea. If it were to go to phase 6, also a little bit of a cool east, kind of a mixed west look based on historical cases on these dates. If it were to make its way over to phase 8, kind of a cool look, coast to coast, maybe warm across the northern tier. That would be a below normal CDD situation, though, because in the early part of the season, the south does a lot of the work on those cooling degree day accumulations. And phase 5, if it were to get back over there, it tends for late May, it tends to be hotter for Texas in the south, cooler Midwest to east. This would give you a split result. You have some cooling degrees with the south, but you wouldn't have any early season activity in the north with that. So that's kind of our spread right now. Usually with a positive global wind, anything above this zero line right here tends to have some cooler flavors in the forecast. It's hard to get big sustained heat stories over large geographic areas with a positive global wind in May. The MJO has been more complicated, been very difficult. If Paul Roundy were on the call, he would be probably telling us that, the RMM is probably not the most accurate way to look at this. It's probably somewhere in between here. Usually the euro suppressing its convection there, so maybe more of a signal into phase 5. Phase 5 for the 16 to 20-day period is shown here. Historical cases, warm south, cool north and west. Phase 6 is shown here. Now, if I overlay a positive global wind with that, I do get that look of that southern warmth there, and then the cool across the Midwest and West. But phase 6, which is, by 16 to 20 day, we'd probably be up in the phase 6 area, I would think. And so there's kind of a still variability there, but some cooler leans across the Midwest to east, some southern heat there. I'm a little concerned about the southern heat story because we've had a very active wet pattern across Texas and the deep south. It's been extremely wet down there, and it's forecast to stay wet over the next 15 days. It's kind of like an El Nino look. You got a wet south sort of story there, and that tends to happen in more El Nino. Positive global wind, it tends to be a more El Nino Bay State pattern. So I do think with the consistent and persistent rains in the Texas area, it'd be hard to get significant heat going in those regions, and we're seeing that kind of slough off as we roll forward on the forecast as well. So that's kind of my big overview look. I think that's my last slide. Oh no, I had another one. One more slide here. So just taking everything off the table and only looking at the positive global wind of all cases from May 26th to May 30th, the current 16 to 20 day period, if it's a 0.5 to 1.5 anomaly above normal, it tends to be kind of a mixed look, cooler east and west, warmer north central US. If it goes above 1.5 or high at or above 1.5, it tends to be cooler Midwest, east and southeast, and you get that heat in the southwest. One thing we're really concerned about is the drought in the southwest. Our colleague Joel has done some work on that, and he has seen some decent historical matches to having the ridge kind of reside there more often than not as you go into the summer season, kind of a drought ridge magnet, if you will. And so that is a concern that we may see. And that's kind of what might explain why our May is not, why our May is looking, let's see, where did I see that? Yeah, where we have the historical positive gland Mays tend to be warm in the Northwest and cool in the Southwest. And the models keep trying to bring energy into the Southwest, but they've been struggling to keep it going. Our estimate is to be hotter down over those drought regions. So I don't know if you remember William or not, but I think Joel was saying it was like a top 5 drought condition in the Southwest or something like that.
Yeah, for the expanse. And I think I forget the areas of severe drought and great, I think he looked at, it was either top 5 or top 10.
Yeah. So it's toward the top of the list there. So that is a concern for us that, maybe we need to, take these kind of composites, but also account for that super dry zone out there in the west. And it doesn't seem like they're gonna get much assistance here. I showed you all the rain; it's going to Texas instead, so it's not helping them out at all. So when I did my forecast for the 16 to 20 day, I went below a 10 and 30 year normal. I think I went like 24 cooling degree days. I think the 30 year normal that we have on our side is like 26. So I went below the 30 year normal, assuming that we'll see that positive global wind create some cooler variability and prevent us from getting too hot too quickly still at this point. So that's kind of the overview. William,
And I would just add, sorry, Matt, real quickly, because I did just a second ago, did a look at some of the tropical forcing stuff. I know you mentioned, I agree, global wind is a big player here, and also MJO that you mentioned. I mean, the last time we went through phases 5 and 6 in early April, it did come through a little bit stronger. So I don't think we can totally rule out the GFS ensemble there. And I do agree that they're generally cooler forcing when it comes to MJO. So I also look specifically at the OLR, the outgoing long wave radiation, and velocity potential stuff across the tropical Pacific, and the best matches for both the 16 to 20 and 16 to 30 in general kind of favor warmth from kind of the drought areas, California, the Great Basin, and then across the Midwest, and then into kind of like the Great Lakes, and then it's kind of normal to even coolish elsewhere. So instead of, I think our 16 to 30 day is focusing the warmth more across the plains and into the Rockies. It was more elongated from kind of the drought regions to the Midwest. So that would be kind of my one maybe risk lean a little bit warmer there into the Southwest and maybe into the Midwest too.
Yeah, it's kind of stretch this out a little bit more. Yeah, it's interesting. I definitely I feel good about the westward extent, and maybe a little bit. Was it more upper Midwest that you were getting to, like this one here?
Yep.
The
Upper,
CFS weeklies. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It seems like watching some of these European model runs, they keep bringing in some energy into the Southwest, and they turn into these bowling balls across the South. So they become these big
Yep.
cutoff lows that slowly grind their way across. And then if you get a little blocking at the NAO or AO space, you start to tap into some Canadian cooling, and it wraps in cool wet patterns for the East Coast, good onshore flow issues and stuff like that. So it just makes it really challenging, I think. But so yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now in terms of our thinking at the end of May. So it's not too exciting for energy traders. They're kind of they want to get going to summer, and this is certainly a slower start to summer again this year, like we saw last year, as Dr. Decker was saying. What is were anyone else on this cooler side as well? And did they have similar reasons, or were there other reasons that they had for maybe a cooler lean in the forecast? Anyone else submit their forecast yet? I guess you have till noon to do it. So
Uh, yeah, this is Dave. I definitely wasn't on the cooler side, but I, I don't know. Michael, or it looks like Philip's on the line, and then we have I think a new contestant here, Dylan. I'm not sure
okay,
if Dylan had a chance to make a forecast yet because Dylan's very new. But
okay.
if any of you guys have any thoughts on this forecast, feel free to share it with Matt.
This is the current forecast, yeah?
Yeah, for the
Yeah,
current season.
okay. I just want to just want to make sure. Yeah, I wound up like right next to the 30-year normal, slightly warmer than it.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a lot of potential for cooler temps in the teleconnections, but on the other side of the coin, the CPC is pretty warm in a lot of areas. So kind of influenced my forecast back to a little to the warmer side, but overall I wound up right next to average, so not too exciting of a forecast.
You might be able to get it with this European weekly that came in last evening. I mean, it's not in the most optimized area in the south, but if you had a decent warm up in the Midwest and East, get some 80s in there at the end of the month, you probably could do something near or slightly above a 30-year normal, I would think. So that would be your strategy there, is to some sort of negative P&A look like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind some 80s.
I know, right?
Beats the 48 I had on Sunday here.
Yeah, it's been quite the slog getting out of the spring here, it looks like. And Dave, you said you were on the warmer side too?
Yeah, and I do. And I'll give my reason here in a second. But Matt, I was also hoping maybe after this, if you could talk a little bit about how we got here. When I was putting together my forecast, I cheated a bit. Well, I guess it's not cheating, but I was just looking back at how the most recent verification and that we have, at least on our board. And it was came in much colder than most of the forecasts expected. And then I looked at the pattern, and the EC 500 millibar height pattern for the 16 to 20 verifying in the most recent 5-day period just completely basically missed that negative NAO. And I just, maybe if you have a minute, you can talk about that a little bit, because I think that's of interest. But in terms of my forecast, to your question real quick, so I don't feel very confident about this, especially after hearing some of your deeper analysis into this. But I went warmer, and I did that a little bit last week too, and I'm not sure that's going to pan out. But my rationale was that it was actually a function of two things. One, that despite some of these cool periods, that eventually we're going to see some of the stronger climate trends of the past 10 years kind of take over, especially deeper we get into May. Just playing the odds game here, that and then on top of that, my analysis, again, much less sophisticated, I think, but just looking at some of the MGO analytics we had, I was thinking that it could actually springboard a little bit more to a warmer side. But admittedly, I don't look at the AAM as much as you guys do, so that's really not as much of a tool in my toolkit. So, for better or worse.
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing, the one threading the needle thing that we found was, um, William, I shared this earlier, was like a global wind. If you have a positive global wind in late May, um, if you had a negative INSO, like just a neutral negative INSO, like we do right now, for some reason there is a subset of years that do run counter to the majority that I've been showing here, that are warmer to hotter. And William, you pointed out in the article last week about 1981 was an interesting example of when that happened, where we had a really strong cool outbreak early to mid-May of that year, but then at the end of May, even though the global wind was positive, we had a reversion back to a hotter pattern. And the one thing that makes me a little nervous about that potential idea, which would make my forecast wrong, is the EPO is not playing along right now. The one thing I saw in a lot of these global wind cases is the EPO is negative. You tend to have more ridging over the Gulf of Alaska area. And even though in the last 24 hours, the NAO and AO became more negative again, as you were mentioning a minute ago, that's been an issue with this current pattern too. The models went back more negative over the past 24 hours on the NAO. They didn't do it on the EPO. The EPO is staying positive, so you're getting still a trough in the Gulf of Alaska area. And do you remember that, William? Was that 81 that did that too?
Yeah, definitely. 81 was definitely the hot outlier
Mm-hmm.
of all the glam
Yeah.
analogs.
So, I mean, there is a chance, and that one was a negative INSO as well. So there is a chance that maybe this subset, this minority report sort of deal, may work its way through, and we get more of a a positive EPO. So you get a trough in the Gulf of Alaska, troughing into the western U.S., and which is the European weeklies I'm showing here, and then you have a rebound ridge over the Midwest to east to get you that slightly warmer than normal pattern, or more aggressive. That 59% grouping shows that's more of aggressive warm up there. So there's a way you could thread that needle, I think, and do that. I don't know why those exception years occurred though. It's the physical behind it is still a challenge to me, to try to figure that out, and it may have to do with the way the MJO worked out, because the one thing with 81 was we had a very similar Indian Ocean progression of the MJO in early to mid-May, like we're seeing this year. And then I think it progressed to 4, 5, and 6, or did it stay in the lower end there? I can't remember, William, which one that
I'm
did.
looking right now.
Oh, yeah.
It ended May in 4.5 and just died
Okay.
out.
Yeah. So
And I think, and another thing on 81, the global wind did weaken mid-month and ended up, it was negative late June.
late June, yeah, but not May, right?
Yeah, not May.
Yeah, yep. That helped it out too, I think. But it was still hot in the end of May with a positive global wind, so it did kind of go against the grain, I guess, of what the majority of the years are that we looked at. So there's always in weather there's always a way, right? So you might have four things pointing in one direction, but then if that fifth thing is the stronger indicator, if it's the stronger driver of the pattern, then it still wins out, and you can still get a different answer. So that's going to be a real challenge, I think, in this forecast. Um, I just go back, for me, I just go back to the fact that this global wind is rising still, and you're on the ascent as well at this time. And I think that's still going to be a trouble spot there. A lot of cases tend to be of the hotter ones. May 2018 was the last hot May that we really had, and it was a negative global wind. It was the opposite of this pattern.
Yeah, I just think the global wind is so strong now comparatively that it's hard to ignore.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that, last year we kind of had a similar really strong spike in mid-May, and then it started weakening through the rest of the month, and then we ended up getting to a hotter June result. But so I just think trucking along there at 1.5 or 2, if the GFS is right, getting into the final week of May, then it's going to be pretty strong through the end of the month.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really big challenge to fight that. Based on that. I mean, and we do a thing where we in the 11 to 15 day, we show all the different indices and their intensity side by side, and the AM is the strongest one it's the strongest piece on the board right now, I guess. All the other indicators, all the different teleconnections, AO, NAO, PNA, WPO, EPO, all those other ones are weaker than what this GLAM indicator is. So it is the most dominant index we have out to day 15 right now.
And I will say, I think Dave mentioned the NAO. I think that's a reasonable thing to watch, since the modeling has been pretty terrible capturing kind of these ripples through the spring. I mean, we've only had, I think, 5 or 6 days of positive NAO since late March, or early April. So it's been a while, and I could definitely see that kind of roaring back. I don't know how long kind of these ripples will last through the spring. By the time you're starting to get to late May, early June, do you still get the same result? I'm not sure, but I think leaning towards a more negative NAO solution is probably reasonable for the 16 to 20.
And you complain about, you guys complain about the East Coast weather being so cool and everything. William forecast for Europe, and they have had the most miserable time. It was one of the coolest Aprils on record, or
it was let me check. So I'm looking at the balance of April and May, and it's the 5th coolest all time for both months combined. But I think April, just checking right now. April ended up being the 2nd coolest of all time to 1986. But
and that's the negative NAO you're talking about, Dave. That's been driving that over there too. So they've had a really cool pattern over in Western Europe. It's been a very slow spring for them, even worse than us, I think. I saw that Ireland had some of their coolest April temperatures of all times. Iceland just hit in May their coldest temperature they've ever experienced in the month of May. They reported that recently. So really interesting. That block over the Greenland side is really working both sides of the block, I guess, East Coast and Western Europe. So
maybe since you guys brought that up, the NAO, do you guys have any thoughts there in terms of Matt? I don't know if you want to maybe pull it up or something. You could pull it up on the forecast contest, or if you have another source. But again, looking at the 16 to 20 EC verifying for this period, I mean, it basically completely missed the block. I think it had positive height anomalies across the Atlantic. And is that, in your mind, is that just a function of some of the typhoon action? Is it just, I mean, well, I guess, and I'm just thinking, how does that play into what happens in the future? I guess it, like William was saying, maybe the right assumption and the safe assumption is to think that it might underestimate a more negative NAO in the future. But I also just wonder, is it just that it could seesaw either way? Is it just bad in both directions, or is it just likely to miss the more negative NAO events?
I had seen a really bad bias last week. I was reporting on a really bad bias on the EPO side. The models really missed the negative EPO that occurred last week to set up this week's big cool outbreak. And that was a big problem on the Pacific side. But there has been an NAO issue as well. Do you remember what dates you were looking back to?
Yeah, do you pull up the forecast contest? If you want to pull it up on your screen, I can navigate you if you have it open.
Okay, let me get over there. I've got some teleconnection forecast too, so let me share my screen.
And then when you get it up, I think it's mark date April 20th is the last one.
April 20th, okay. So under forecast, is it, or performance?
Yeah, performance weekly. And then if you go back to 2021.
Oh, sorry.
And then April, what did I say? April 20th? What did I say?
April 20th or 27th? 20th.
Yeah, so this is, April 20th. That's going to be the most recent verification. So it's, as of a day ago. And so if you go, if you find the EC, which is the 4th row, and then go all the way to the right, you can look at the global, like that. Yeah, the global map. Mm-hmm. And look at this global map, right? This is verifying from May 5th to May 10th. Now, if you have it, if you have a verification.
I do. I can show you that. Yeah.
I mean, somewhere around there. I mean, it's not even close.
Yeah, I will say the weeklies are terrible. That's for sure. They've not been doing very well. So it's been very difficult to use them. Let's see. So this is the entire globe. So let's do that real quick.
And right, by the way, what you're saying also, I think, I know you weren't on last week, but yeah, I remember us, I think, having a similar conversation about last week, the miss across the, the EPO kind of region. And here we are just looking at the NAO sort of region.
This might not be updated because we use the reanalysis data and it may not be through yesterday. Oh, it's behind. Yeah, I only got 5 through 8, but I can still
close. That's close.
Look. You can see it was a very negative NAO, and you got a big trough in the eastern U.S. Very opposite of this. It had a southeast ridge that was favoring there. And it's definitely problematic. It definitely missed that block again, and it's been a recurring issue with the with the NAO kept reappearing, as William said. I was going to see if I can pull that up real quick here. So that was April 20th forecast. And I can go back and look at the April 20th forecast here for the NAO. And it'll overlay what actually happened. So April 20th, 0Z cycle. Actually, yeah.
Hey Matt, can you check out the EAWR? I think it's a better.
Oh, okay.
I think the EAWR is what was so strong, almost more than.
So it was lower than if I just filter out the European, for example, which is what Dave was talking about. You could see it came in lower than expected there. So the EAWR takes into account like the NAO space too, but also into Asia as well, right? William, is that right?
Sorry, yeah, it captures more of the pattern from just because if you look at the upper level map, the block is a little bit westward shifted over Greenland, so it's not really a perfect NAO space. So the EAWR is kind of capturing almost that trough in the eastern Atlantic a little bit better, and I think captures the overall kind of shift of it a little bit better.
It didn't do as bad on the EPO. Okay, yeah, the EAWR then it might be a better one to look at for that one. Generally lower, but this is only the day 15 from April 20th. You were looking at the 16 to 20 day from the European weeklies. So we have a.
Yeah, I think it's a bigger miss because you can see there in the Euro ensemble it was going towards neutral, and it ended up being way more negative.
We have the European weeklies roll forward too, where you could see, and it'd be helpful if I did the Northern Hemisphere or something, but you could see like what it's looking like right now. 500 millibars. So this is what the current week one looks like, Friday to Thursday with that negative NAO, and just a week earlier when it was week two, it had a positive NAO. So it can't even nail it. I guess 1 week when it was way out on week 5, it actually had it briefly there, week 6, and then it lost it by week 4. These are all the weeks rolled forward, basically, just to give you an idea. These are EIA weeks here, but you can do like a Monday to Friday period. But just to kind of show how it's been missing the high latitudes pretty well there. It's not been good. And the end result for North America is like, here's the upcoming, 14th through the 20th cool pattern that we're in. And, it started to cool off when it was 2 weeks out. And then 3 weeks out, it was just too warm. So it's been really struggling. It's been pretty bad. Usually week 6, it tries to go, like you were saying, to the climate, adjustment. So the climate trend, but starts to find some noise as it gets closer in. But yeah, it's been ugly. I guess with that NAO thing, I can also show you the behavior. Like William was saying, how it's been mostly negative most of the time through the spring here. And I could show a 90-day history just to give you an idea on that. So you can see there's been a few positive NAO spikes at times, but there's been a higher duration in the negative category.
Especially since late March there.
Yeah.
We only briefly jumped up.
Yeah.
Up there.
So it's definitely been a struggle. Is the 6Z cycle, so the Euro only goes out so far. But if I go back to the 0Z cycle and add that 90-day history, you can see they're trying to dip back down again. It seems like every peak is getting weaker too. So, it reminds me of it reminds me a little bit of like 09 and 10 and time frame when we had a lot of high frequency negative NAO periods during that time. In fact, Todd Crawford at IBM was showing this, and I don't know if I can show it here as well, but he did a year-over-year comparison. But one thing he was pointing, and this is a feedback loop issue though, so you can't really say this is the cause of it. But the waters in the North Atlantic have been warming up quite a bit, and he showed a year-over-year comparison. It's a lot warmer in the North Atlantic versus last year, and coincidentally, it's a lot cooler in the Southern Atlantic versus last year in the MDR area for the hurricane season. But we've had a lot of significant North Atlantic warming this year. Compared to last year. I guess, this is a nice way to see it here. It's a lot warmer up here and then up to the north there. Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, and then it's a lot cooler down here compared to, and these are the trends too. It's been warming the north and cooling the south over the past few weeks as well. So I don't know what that means for the start of the hurricane season. We're not going to have as much of a heat content story down there, but it does seem to be, helping the maybe some feedback looping into more region in North Atlantic, perhaps.
Because that we've had a cold pool semi regularly there in the North Atlantic for the past several years, and it's not really there now. Kind of it's basically normals and then aboves across much of the basin. So that was a big shift when we did our seasonal update. One of the big shifts over the past month had been the warming of the North Atlantic, and that had a cool impact on the Europe summer
Forecast,
outlook
yeah.
as well. So I think that I don't know how much of an actual driver for the negative NAO it actually is, but I could see it supporting it a little bit more.
I was just thinking, it's a little bit of a positive feedback loop, but it's not. I don't think that's the main driver, perhaps. But yeah, I agree. So it's interesting. I mean, you can't really blame it on stratospheric warming, really. I mean, we had that big one in January. We had a smaller final warming not too long ago, but I don't think that was a really big translator to this.
Yeah, and I just checked the kind of the transects, looking at the stratosphere down to the troposphere, and I don't see it. Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's too much of a connection there.
There's the final warming right there. So look, they're separate. Yeah, that's interesting.
And Matt, I just sent through the chat like the 30-day overall height anomaly. I was just thinking about what you were saying about the NAO. Just looking at the big picture. I mean, it is there's a lot of ridging in places where you want it to be cold for sure. And so you guys were kind of narrowing or talking about drivers that can explain it. Coming back to like the some of the typhoons and things like that, or the weakening La Nina transitioning to neutral or whatever, do you attribute like this kind of pattern here over the last 30 plus days, not just blocking in the NAO area, but blocking, like you said, over Alaska and in the West Pacific and stuff like that? Do you think this has can be attributed to some of the things going on in the Pacific, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I was thinking, when we did our last talk with everybody here, we were talking about the typhoon wild card at that time, and it was an unusual early season typhoon, super typhoon in the West Pacific, and it didn't phase with the first trough opportunity it had. It missed that trough, and so it didn't go really amplified cool immediately, but it did cool down the following week as it kind of hooked up with another trough that kind of swung through Eastern Asia and into the Western Pacific. So I think there might have been a little bit of influence from the typhoon that may have set the stage up for the EPO surprise that we had in the past 2 weeks. But I really feel like it was the strong MJO signal too that went through 8 and 1 in late April and early May. It was a delayed reaction, which maybe your delayed tool that you use for the MJO might have been more skillful in that, but it really did seem to play into this really. And some folks had posted, if you saw on weather Twitter or whatever, that this was one of the strongest MJO waves on record in the middle to latter part of spring that occurred. So I do think this may have been a driver. You get dateline forcing tends to force more ridging across the North Pacific into the Alaska area. So I think a combination of the typhoon and the strong MJO signal may have helped to set up this cool pattern that we're in right now.
And at least my last question regarding this, because you guys have talked about this a little bit, but in terms of the model guidance over the past month, in particular, I guess, like the ECMWF and the American counterpart, in that medium range period, like that 15 to 30 day period, how would you grade it over the last 30, 45 days? Like, it captured reasonably well the pattern transitions, or really bad, or somewhere in the middle?
I had put my slides together for this talk last month, and I felt like the CFS did pretty good. The CFS and the GFS Ensemble weeklies did better than the European weeklies on capturing this cool pattern into early mid-May. So yeah, I did think that maybe the American side might have done better, which is go USA, I guess. But they tended to see it a little bit better. Let's see. clunky slides here, but I had put this together for the last talk, and this is the GFS on weekly for the 27th to the 2nd, and this is the 28th to the 2nd, and it had this cool push into the Midwest and East and the warmth over the drought areas, and I feel like this might have worked a little bit better overall. Now we did have that transient warm up around the 4th and 5th into the eastern US, just behind this period here. So it looked maybe a little like a warm up in the East and Midwest, but it was brief. It came in and went right back out again. So, I felt like these guys did a decent job capturing the general pattern that we've been getting with the more of a ridging in the West and a trough in the Midwest area. So I give them some props for that. I think they may have been working a little bit better, and they're showing that again this time too. For the current 16 to 20 day, they're on the cooler side, while the Europeans on the warmer side again.
Cool, great. And William, are you? It seems like you focus a little bit more on Europe. Are you seeing the same thing? Like, how have they done for capturing the cool Europe spring there?
Yeah, I would agree that in general, the American models have done better. I don't know how. I wouldn't. I'd have to go back and look at how well they actually did. But at times, a lot of the subseasonal space has actually done a decent job. I still think the CFS has won out. It's a little bit different for the Europe pattern. As long as you kind of capture that North Atlantic, or not even North Atlantic, but if you capture the big block over Scandinavia or something, if you get one part of the pattern right, you can do a little bit better in terms of modeling. I think you have a few more variables for the US side, but I would say in general that they've done, the American models have done better. I would say back to the US, I still, not to sound like a broken record, but I do think that the really strong global wind is just big here. And when you combine that with still a negative neutral, it's not a big La Nina lean, but it's still negative neutral, and you have that positive wind, global wind, it's just a very small subset of years. It's a unique situation, but they tend to in both April and May come out on the cooler side, and some of the cooler years of the 2000s were that same discrepancy, the kind of the negative neutral, and so but still a positive global wind, which is more typical of an El Nino atmospheric response. So I think that's just a big part of the pattern we're seeing now, because we had a positive global wind for most of April. It did break down and go negative late April and here in early May, but now it's going back positive. I think that's still a big driver here going forward.
Yeah, and I know it's thank you that it's not as simple as one or two things, but do you think the fact that we've kind of transitioned out of that La Nina toward more of a neutral El Nino during this time, it's, in hindsight, do you think that along with these other things, subseasonal signals and stuff, may play a role in getting that bigger, signal through phases 7, 8, 1, or do you think it's just kind of coincidence? Have you guys done any research on that? I haven't. I'm just, I don't know, just speculating.
Yeah, that seems fair, that maybe it may have helped that wave along a little bit. I almost felt like that wave was it more wind versus convection, William? That went across
It was
the
a little bit. It was both.
Yeah, okay.
It was both, but the wind was probably stronger, but there was some convection with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do, if you look at the changes over the tropical Pacific in general, there in the central and eastern Pacific, they've warmed a bit. I could see it helping a little bit. When you look at the overall anomalies, though, they're not very strong.
Yeah.
But I could see it helping to a certain extent. I still think, when you look at it in terms of sea surface temperatures, the big driver is still over the Indian Ocean. And that's what, another reason why I think you can get, 2, 3, 4, 5 coming in a little bit stronger than what the models suggest, because you still, the SSTs are still torching over there, and they've strengthened over the past month. So I still think that's, it's still split forcing to a certain extent. And a lot of that is coming from, phase 1, 2, and 3.
And for what it's worth, in terms of the performance metrics, our internal sample, which is smaller than yours, like we only track the EC once weekly as opposed to twice weekly.
Okay.
But I know Dr. Decker's been pointing this out during the course of the winter, but it looks like We have one more forecast verification tied to the heating season. It's going to be this next one. But, I was just looking at the numbers, and I think the CFS is going to score better. And if it does, I think it's going to finish ahead of the EC in our performance table. And this would be the first time in either the cooling season or heating season since we started.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
So, yeah.
I feel like it's been doing fairly well from what I've been seeing. And the thing that frustrates me a little bit is I feel like it's doing better than the GFS Ensemble Weeklies. And NOAA is planning to make the GFS Ensemble Weeklies their primary sub-seasonal forecast tool. They're going to retire the NOAA CFS model at some point and use the GFS Ensemble Weeklies. And I've not been very impressed by them. I feel like and I showed you that 60 and 20, they were pretty close to each other in that example, but I've seen other examples. I've got a big debate that I'm going to be verifying next Wednesday. There was a big 60 and 30 day debate between the two of them. I'm going to be verifying next week to see who did better on that one. But yeah, it's been interesting. I feel like the CFS is doing better right now, and I feel sad that might be the one they're going to get rid of. So hopefully it'll be a long retirement. So, yeah. So we'll see.
So, does any of this, do you guys see any of this? I'm sure you get this question a lot, but as we transition into June, July, and August, do we just kind of forget everything that we've seen here? Or could any of these things be harbingers of things to come for the summer?
Yeah, we were a little worried because we have a hot June forecast similar to last year, and the CFS weekly global wind forecast is not like last year from the CFS model. The CFS model is suggesting that the global wind stays very robustly positive through 2/3 of June, all the way. It's now up to June 21st now. And last year we had the cool May last year, like we were talking about at the beginning of the call, but then it transitioned to a negative global wind. It was a negative tendency.
Wow.
Late May into early June. So you had this negative tendency, you shifted to a hot pattern. We had a hot June last year. It was a top 10 hot June last year, I think. And so, we had a pretty robust start to summer after that cool May. But this year, right now, the CFS is not playing along. If you look at some of the individual members, there was one member that went negative by the second half of June. So there is some noise in there, but some of them are going back up again. So it's just not looking too constructive from the CFS standpoint. And we don't have a lot of other tools to go out this far. The Euro Weeklies don't have all the levels that we need to calculate this. Unfortunately, the GFS Ensemble Weeklies don't have all the layers yet on that guidance for us to create these forecasts. So all we have is the CFS at this moment. It did pretty well. We had to recalibrate it at the end of April because it was having a bias issue. And when we recalibrated it, it was working really well. And you can see here the verifications, if you go back in time since we recalibrated, I think it was in late April we did that, and it's been working pretty good. It captured the dip. It was a little faster, but it did capture the dip, and then it is capturing the incline that we're about to see here in the coming days. So it seems to be doing pretty good at the moment. But gosh, I forget when we made that shift in the bias correction on it. Going back to April 21st, there you could see that story. Last year, the bigger surge earlier in May gave us that bigger, colder start to May, and now we're doing it a little later, I guess, with the positive tendency.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's problematic. We're going to have to think about our June forecast next week, and whether we might need to cool it or not. We're going to have to see how these global wind trends go. That was where it was a problem. It was too high. It wasn't showing the dip hardly at all, and that's when we recalibrate after the 15th. So I don't know. Maybe it'll find its way back negative again. Maybe recalibration didn't work, but and it'll be back negative again. But right now, as of right now, the 15-day models aren't showing any dips either at this point in this guidance. So we'll have to see how it goes. We may have to start pulling back on summer. No, we've been favoring a hotter than normal summer that was cooler than last year. It usually in the second year of a La Nina cycle, you're not as hot as the first year. First year is the one that really tends to cook. You tend to see a lot more positive momentum in the negative momentum in the global wind. You get more stabilized ridging in the mid latitudes and stuff like that. The second summers tend to be a little softer, still hot, but not as intense. So that's been our theme. It's been really interesting. We have a kind of a thing where a psychological benchmark for summers for power traders and gas traders is 1,000 cooling degree days. And, in 2010, 2011, 2012, we had over 1,000 cooling degree days in all those summers, really hot summers, a lot of drought with that long extended La Nina period. And then we had a period of cooler summers from 13, 14, and then it started to crank back up again by around the 2015, but it was still below 1,000 for those 3 summers in a row. And then since that time, we have hit every other summer. So 2016, 2018, and 2020 were all above 1,000 cooling degree days. And then 2017, 19 have been below 1,000, and 15 below 1,000 cooling degree days. So we've been in this weird, almost biennial pattern right now for North America. So in that pattern, we're due for a sub 1,000 summer here. Still hotter than 30-year normal, maybe in the upper 900s where we're at for cooling degree days. But yes, we might take a breather from the 1,000 club this year.
And I would throw in another plug for Europe here, looking at this really strong positive global wind, and then also taking into consideration a lot of the North Atlantic SST changes. I noted in our seasonal a reasonable, maybe not reasonable, but a risk for Europe is one of the rare instances where the HDDs outweigh CDDs. This summer, it's a few of those years. I think 2011 was the last time that happened. But
interesting.
Positive global wind like this for June in Europe is really, really cool, and that's where you actually get most of your heating demand. It's the bigger heating demand month compared to July and August. But so I think it could be interesting. I think it could really be, in terms of cooling demand, although there isn't really much demand in Europe in the summer to begin with, but it's just one of those interesting kind of flips there that could be possible.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I guess you need the NAO to perform for that too, right? I guess to some degree.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Matt, sorry, did you say you're currently a little bit warmer than the 10-year, or?
No, for the summer we're slightly cooler than a 10-year, but we're way warmer than a 30-year. There's a pretty big gap in the summers. Now with the new normals that just updated, the gap tightened a little bit, but we are just slightly below a 10-year normal, and then hotter than a 30. So we've had some pretty hot summers, with the number of those 1,000 plus ones there. So it's I think the 10-year normal is. Let's see if I can pull it up here. 10-year normal is in the 970s, I think it is. And so just give you a quick idea of our summer outlook here. So we're going 962 right now. A 10-year normal is 976, so about 14 over there. And so we're in what we call the gray zone here, where it's hotter than a 30-year normal. These are below 30-year normal summers over here. So it's hotter than a 30-year normal, but it's cooler than the 10-year. So the reds are above the 10-year here. And I mentioned before, got the 16, 18, 20, and then the 10, 11, 12. Those 6 years were above 1,000 cooling degree days. So there's a pretty big gap. Now we just revised the 30-year normal. We just got the new normals now, and the old 30-year normal was in the upper 800s, but now we're at 914 with the 30-year normal. So it made a bit of a jump. Made a few more blue years out of gray years there. So with the warmer normals. But yeah, so at our 962, we're still at the top 10 hottest summer back to 1950, number 10, just behind 2006. So we're not too cool for the summer, but we are cooler than last year. Last year was way up here, 1031. So we'll have to see how it goes. With the higher global wind in June, it'll give us a head start with that thinking.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Matt or William about the forecast?
Thanks for having us and everything, and we'll see if we can get summer going or not. That's the big challenge here.
Yeah, let's at least we're saving on the air conditioning bill, right?
I know. Yep.
So
very low degree days right now. Yeah, in fact, May is tracking. I was impressed by that this morning with our latest forecast. May only has 102 population weighted cooling degree days based on our current estimate through the end of the month, and that is the 4th lowest of the 2000s. You have to go back to 2008 to get one that was lower by only 2. So it's been a while. It's been 13 years since we've had something lower than where we're at right now in terms of how slow of a summer it's been so far in cooling degree days.
All right.
Not a record, but you know, those records are down in the 80s and 70s, but yeah, it's still pretty low.
Yeah, I'm okay with the delayed summer,
Yeah.
'cause usually once it gets here, it's, especially down where you are.
Yeah, maybe Joe Bastardi, the delayed but not denied. He always says
Oh, good.
that's his
I
favorite
remember that
go-to.
one.
Yep,
Right.
yep.
All right. And on that note, right?
Yes.
Tribute to Joe Bastardi here.
Yeah.
No, it was great having you here, Matt and William. Thanks for all the awesome information about not only the medium range but the summer forecast. So hopefully, I guess we'll have you back soon, and we can see how things are turning out.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Take care, guys.
Have a good one. Take care.
Thanks.